ever wondered about how Jorvik citizens get their power? And I'm not talking like political power or even magic. I mean electricity. Maybe this question has never crossed your mind, but it has for me. Today, I'm going to be diving into the different power sources that could be utilized on Jorvik and how these houses and facilities should be getting their power in the first place. Full disclosure, this video is heavily inspired by Any Austin's content. If you like this even a little bit, I highly recommend his channel. And since I know he likely doesn't even know that Star Stable exists, I'm stepping up to the mantle to answer this unasked question. Now, I had to do some research first into how European countries get their power. I watch a lot of practical engineering too, and I've learned at least 90% of what I know about the power grid from his content. So if you don't know how power grids work, I'm not going to give you the most in-depth answer, but let me lay the groundwork at least. In the United States, Canada, and across Europe, power grids are interconnected, even between countries. This collaboration of power systems is beneficial to all because the power grid is a very finicky thing. It has to be able to stay at a semi-consistent flow while also being able to manage the output taken at random and various intervals from homes and businesses alike throughout the day. Being interconnected allows for a better management of this flow, and it's a great failsafe in case one portion ever needs to go offline. If you'd like to learn more about this, I highly recommend the video, How Does the Power Grid Work? Or What is a Black Star to the Power Grid by Practical Engineering. I'll have both videos linked below. With that basic information in mind, let me show you a map of the synchronous power grid currently found across Europe. As you can see, there are a few different sections of this power grid, but they commonly spread across multiple countries, the exceptions here being Britain, Ireland, and Iceland. This is because these are island countries, and while underwater cables are a thing, they currently aren't in place to connect to the power grid. The first thing I wanted to figure out once finding out this information is where exactly Jorvik lies amidst all of this. Here is what Star Stable has to say about this continent. Jorvik, located somewhere between Norway, Iceland, and the British Isles, of which it once was part of, is a nexus of worlds. Now, this is obviously just describing the country as a whole, but it gives us the perfect information to answer the question about where Jorvik is. It's somewhere around here. Now, we do not have a complete map of Jorvik, but we have one that is larger than what we actually see in game. This map is the most complete, and yet it claims to only be southwestern Jorvik, implying that there's a ton more we can't see. Regardless, knowing that Jorvik is an island nation, we can assume that its power grid is individual and not connected to the rest of Europe. It's also important to keep in mind that the scale in which we experience Jorvik is likely not to scale. For example, have you ever noticed that there are basically no houses in Moreland, and yet several people claim to live here? The same can be said of Fort Pinta. You're telling me everyone lives in this one central building? James would literally never. We also rarely see cars driving around, or bikes, which you know would be popular in a European country like this. There are also no substations, which would be used to distribute power, or power plants for that matter. Overall, the game is geared towards frolicking, magic, and the power of friendship, so take the logistics of the game's scale with a grain of salt. I personally don't think the in-game Jorvik is the actual fully canon Jorvik for all the reasons stated. Despite that, we can actually see a few examples of energy sources in the game. For one, we have the oil fields located just outside of the Baroness's racetrack. Oil and other fossil fuels such as gas and coal are burned at power plants to produce energy. As of 2023, fossil fuels made up 1/3 of all energy sources found in Europe. But oil was one of the least used energy sources, sitting at less than 2% of the total energy types used across the continent. The primary fossil fuels used were gas at 17% and coal at 12%. While Jorvik could, of course, be an exception, based on the average, we can likely assume that oil is not the predominant power source across the island. So, what other examples can we find? At a few locations on the map, you can actually find signs of both liquid gas, or petrol, and gas vapor being used to power various things. Right behind Steve's barn, even, is a propane tank, and you can find another one just down the road by Marley. I mean, hell, there's even one in Valley of the Hidden Dinosaur. They're probably getting some of this gas directly from the oil fields, too. I learned that while playing Turmoil. One of the strongest examples of power generations we see in the game is actually at Big Bonnie's house. She has her own personal wind turbine up top. While I don't plan on getting into the logistics of how personal power generation is actually a current problem trying to be solved by the power grid, it is nice to see that this type of generation is actually in-game. Overall, power clearly exists in-game. From light fixtures to power boxes, from cars to drive around the map, including this bulldozer that's pouring out black smoke, your regions are getting their power from somewhere. So, let's talk about the most likely ways that the people of Jorvik would be generating power. The current most common ways that people across the world generate power are as follows: power plants, wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, and geothermal. While there are other niches within power plants, such as coal versus gas, this is how we're going to discuss what would most likely be used across Jorvik. And yes, I know magic is a thing across Jorvik, and while it probably could be used for a power generation, we're not getting into that today. Here is a map that highlights the most common sources of power generation in Europe and Northern Africa. Now, Jorvik's geography is quite diverse. The game makers and original creators did a decent job at highlighting how an island nation would exist in the first place by giving Jorvik a decent amount of mountain ranges. I'm sure they took inspiration from their home country of Sweden, though I am very curious to know if the geography of Jorvik is possible based on where it is and how it's formed, but that's an idea for another video. As you can see on this map, however, the island nations commonly utilize wind as a primary source of their energy. This is because of their location near the ocean and the size of their countries. The uninterrupted stretch across the ocean makes for a lot of wind buildup, so we can easily assume that Jorvik would have wind turbines scattered across the country. Everyone feel like the perfect place for them to be, in fact. I mean, the name speaks for itself. They'd probably look something like this. Southof is also the perfect location for wind turbines, and they'd probably look something like the ones you'd find on the coast of Ireland. Hell, the wind turbines could even be in the ocean. Did you know they did that? Look at these. Humans are so innovative. Now, I hear you saying, Apple, what about the small windmills like the one you see at Steve's farm or on Southof? And I asked myself the same thing. While I was pretty sure that these weren't related to power, I wanted to be certain. After doing some research, it turns out that these are commonly connected to wells and are used to pump water on the property, or even directly to water spigots and troughs. Helpful infrastructure, but not what we're looking into today. While I do think wind would be the primary source of energy on Jorvik, it certainly wouldn't be the only source. Have you ever heard of Ashland? If you're a more seasoned Star Stable enjoyer, you likely know what Ashland is. It's a portion of the map that was in development to be used later on in the game, but was never fully realized. Who knows though, it could still be in the future. Regardless, it shows that Jorvik canonically has volcanoes, which makes sense for this region of the world and for the formation of Jorvik. So, I think it would just make sense for an island nation like this to utilize this geothermal energy as part of their power grid. Here are some real-life examples of geothermal power plants as seen in Iceland, another volcanic country. They'd probably be located right here in Valley of the Hidden Dinosaur.
But wait, there's more!
Because I've saved the best for last. This type of energy generation isn't just theoretical, it's canon to the Star Stable universe. You just can't currently access it in Star Stable Online. In case you haven't played the original Season Rider games, Jorvik canonically has a large dam and water reservoir. If you look on the map that we saw earlier, it is actually located just north of Valley of the Hidden Dinosaur. It's called the Great Reservoir, and it's home to the Bastion Dam. In case you're unaware, water reservoirs aren't just used to manage water distribution. In fact, they're primarily used to generate power. This is because dams aren't just stationary walls meant to hold water back forever. Beyond them is usually a river which requires a continuous flow of water in order to be maintained. Dams often have spillways and other controlled valves that allow water out of the reservoir so they can continue downstream. Inside of the dam, where the water flows through, are large turbines that are powered by the water's movement. So if this is canon and everyone in the world needs power, why doesn't Star Stable have more visual representation of these realistic things when so many of them are already hinted at in game? Long story short, it'd just be ugly. It'd also be the cause of a higher chance of lag by adding in a bunch of unnecessary objects, especially moving ones like wind turbines. Besides, I want you to think for a second about how spread out Jorvik is, disregarding the warped scale of the game. You know how you get power distributed across long distances like this? That's right, power lines. While they could make more interesting power lines like some of the ones in Iceland, most of them would probably look like this, or this. The game developers have snuck in genuine examples of the power grid throughout this game, whether it was intentional or not. When artists of all kinds, and yes, game developers are artists, are making their works, they look into real-life examples as a reference. It's nearly impossible when sculpting your land to not accidentally include functioning infrastructure when the references you see are of real-life, functioning infrastructure. Did the people who make the dam in the Seasons Riders game think about the lore implications of the power being generated by the dam and how it impacts the local population? Probably not, but the implications are still there. Now, this doesn't make SSO bad game developers either, by the way. Do you really want to be running under a bunch of high voltage power lines all the time? Is this really the view you want to see as you're going through Firgrove or Valedale Lake? Have you ever even questioned the logistics of this before you clicked on this video? Now, I made this video because I like picturing what the real Jorvik looks like. because, like I mentioned earlier, there's way too few houses in Moreland to actually be housing the town's population. I know this game is built with player experience in mind. We don't want it to actually take hours to run from one town to another, so things are scaled for a better user experience. I also made this because I like noticing the little details, like how this power line just stops near Steve's farm and never actually connects to anything. Or this power line, which just goes from the gate to the house? Huh? Or how there are no gas stations anywhere, despite multiple examples of working cars and other motor vehicles in the game. These are fun details to me, not flaws, and I hope you see them as fun too. If you like this type of content, I'll probably be making more in the future, so leave a like or a comment to let me know you're in for the ride. I have a few more ideas for Star Stable in this same vein, but who knows what other games I may tackle. If you subscribe, you'll get to find out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! You're saying, Apple, you could just, like, go back to your home stable, but I wanted another shot of Valley and Dinosaur, so, like, I would rather not. All because I wanted a shot of the volcano. Guess it will be in the video. Yeah, there we fucking go. You thought I couldn't fucking get out. You fucking disbelief. Oh, hush.